Sometimes the wild surprises you in ways no camera could ever capture. I thought I'd mastered Africa's savanna, photographing lions and elephants for nearly 2 decades. But nothing could have prepared me for the day I found myself trapped in the mud, helpless, staring at death. And a lion appeared, not as a predator, but as a savior. If you've ever wondered what it truly means to witness the wild's unexpected compassion, hit that like button and subscribe to join me on this incredible journey. Share your thoughts below. Would you believe a lion could save a human life? The African sun was relentless that afternoon, beating down on Ruaha National Park with the oppressive heat only the dry season could deliver. I, Marcus Atwood, had long been accustomed to the extremes of this land, the shimmering waves of heat that made even the air seem to shimmer, the cacophony of wildlife in the brush, and the dizzying vastness of a landscape that seemed to stretch to infinity. Yet in my nearly 20 years as a wildlife photographer, nothing had prepared me for the sensation of helplessness that now gripped me with unrelenting force. One misstep, one moment of misplaced confidence, and I was trapped thigh-deep in mud that refused to release me. It had started innocuously enough. The rains earlier in the season had transformed the park's familiar landscape into a labyrinth of temporary waterways and pools. These watering holes attracted everything from grazing antelope to lumbering elephants, each animal oblivious to the lurking dangers hidden in the soil beneath their feet. I had discovered a particular depression that had filled with water, a perfect mirror reflecting the cloudless sky. From my elevated position, I could observe without disturbance, capturing the natural rhythms of life in Ruaha. My guide, Jabari, had cautioned me repeatedly to remain on solid ground, to avoid the treacherous crust mud near the water's edge. I had nodded politely, acknowledging his advice while ignoring the anxiety it suggested. Confidence, or perhaps arrogance, had always accompanied me on these excursions. I had traversed more landscapes than I could remember, climbing cliffs, wading through rivers, and maneuvering through brush so dense that it threatened to swallow me whole. Each expedition reinforced a quiet, stubborn certainty. I was in control. I knew the risks, and I knew how to mitigate them. But the African mud had its own designs. I had been photographing a family of warthogs, the pink snouts and bristled backs perfectly framed in my telephoto lens. Each shot felt like a gift, a fleeting glimpse of life unspoiled by human presence. Stepping closer for a better angle, the ground beneath me betrayed its hidden nature. One moment I was balancing, lens focused, fingers poised on the shutter, and the next I sank. The mud was viscous and unyielding, pulling at my legs with a force that seemed almost conscious. The first instinct was panic, but I forced myself to breathe and assess the situation. Occupational hazards were part of my life. I had extricated myself from worse. My tripod became a lever, a temporary ally against the suction of the mud. Yet every movement, every exertion only seemed to accelerate my descent. Within minutes, the cold, wet soil had climbed to my waist, clinging to my clothes and sapping my strength. My satellite phone, left in my backpack on the ground just beyond reach, might as well have been at the bottom of the ocean. The radio clipped to my belt was now submerged, its usefulness nullified. Alone, immobile, and increasingly aware of my vulnerability, fear began its insidious creep. Nightfall arrived with a cruelty unique to the African plains. The temperature dropped sharply, and the mud, previously yielding in parts, hardened around my body, locking me in place. I drifted between panic and exhaustion, my mind trying to conjure solutions from past experiences that now seemed woefully inadequate. The sounds of the park changed in the darkness. Hyenas laughed somewhere in the distance, and the occasional call of a nocturnal bird reminded me that life continued even as mine seemed imperiled. I imagined vultures circling above, awaiting my final breath. In that darkness, the irony struck me with merciless clarity. Water had created this prison, and now it might dictate my death. By dawn, the situation had worsened. My body had sunk further, now nearly to my shoulders. Each breath was laborious, and the rising sun offered no comfort. Only the harsh revelation that I might survive the night, only to perish in the following hours without intervention. I tried calling out, but my voice emerged as a hoarse whisper, swallowed by the expanse of the wilderness. Jabari would come searching eventually, But the park was vast and our rendezvous location deliberately vague. Survival depended entirely on a combination of luck and hope, and both felt like fragile, distant concepts. The day passed slowly, every hour a testament to endurance. Distant sounds, an occasional vehicle engine, the rustle of nearby animals, sparked hope that quickly faded when no rescue appeared. Animals approached the water, indifferent to my plight, their instincts overriding any curiosity. I could almost feel the cold judgment of nature itself. Life goes on, regardless of the suffering of one individual. By the second night, dehydration had begun to torment me with a vicious intensity. My lips were cracked, my tongue swollen, and coherent thoughts seemed a fading luxury. I calculated mentally, grimly, that the human body could survive roughly 3 days without water. My window of life was closing with every passing moment. Then came the lion. At first, I did not recognize him for what he was, only noting a dark silhouette at the water's edge, moving with the deliberate grace of a predator in its prime. As a wildlife photographer, I had spent countless hours observing lions, studying their movements, noting the subtle language of posture and expression, but experience offered no solace now. My body was weak, my arms pinned by hardened mud, and instinct screamed that this was the end. He drank from the watering hole with measured, majestic movements, water dripping from his muzzle, muscles rippling beneath his tawny coat. When his amber eyes met mine, a surge of primal fear cut through my delirium. Predators are attuned to vulnerability, and nothing could have appeared more vulnerable than I. I braced for the inevitable, for teeth and claws to end my torment. Yet he did not attack. Instead, he approached cautiously, stopping 20 feet away, nostrils flaring as he assessed the strange, trapped creature before him. His eyes held a curiosity I could not interpret, and he remained in place for what felt like an eternity. I closed my eyes, preparing for pain, despair mixing with disbelief, when a rough, warm sensation brushed my cheek. Opening my eyes, I realized he was pawing at the hardened mud around my shoulder. For a moment, I questioned my senses. Dehydration can produce vivid hallucinations, a mind desperate for hope creating visions of impossible saviors. But the sensation was tangible. The weight of his paw, the persistent movement of the hardened clay. It was real. My mind raced to reconcile this impossible act with everything I knew of predator behavior. A lion does not help humans. A lion does not show empathy. Yet here he was, breaking through the mud with methodical precision, occasionally glancing at me as though gauging my response. Hours passed in a haze of pain, exhaustion, and disbelief. The lion worked with steady persistence, and for the first time since I had become trapped, I felt a tiny shift in my predicament. My right arm, once rigidly bound by the mud, now had a small degree of movement. Consciousness wavered in the hot African afternoon, but the lion remained beside me, alternating between digging and resting, a silent sentinel against the sun, against the inevitability of death. And in that moment, trapped in mud that might have been my grave, I understood something profound. Survival sometimes depends not on human skill or cunning, but on the mysterious, inexplicable behaviors of the wild. My fate, for reasons I could not yet comprehend, had been placed in the paws of a lion. The sun had climbed higher by the time I fully registered the enormity of what was happening. The lion, magnificent and terrifying in equal measure, had not attacked. He had not even made an aggressive approach. Instead, he crouched beside me in an uncharacteristic calm, amber eyes observing each subtle movement I made. Every muscle in his body rippled with restrained energy, yet he exuded a patience I had never seen in a predator so close to its prey. For hours I lay trapped, unsure whether I was dreaming or witnessing an extraordinary reality that defied every principle of wildlife behavior I had spent decades studying. Time passed in a blur. My body, weakened from exhaustion and dehydration, ached with every impossible movement. The sun baked the earth above me, turning the crusty mud around my chest and shoulders into an almost unbreakable prison. Yet, the lion worked methodically, his powerful claws scraping and breaking the hardened layer bit by bit. At first, I thought perhaps he was merely playing, testing this strange, squirming creature. but the pattern of his actions became evident as my right arm gained a tiny measure of freedom. His movements were precise, almost surgical, as if he understood exactly where to pry without causing harm. I tried to speak, croaking weakly, hoping my voice might reach him or, perhaps, some distant human who could hear. My throat burned with dryness, cracked from days without water, and the words barely formed. Yet each futile sound seemed to prompt no hostility from him. He regarded me with a look I interpreted as measured curiosity, tilting his head, nostrils flaring, scenting the air around us. The audacity of hope surged through me, mingling with the disbelief that I was alive and conscious while a lion persisted in an act I had no words to describe. Night fell again, and the temperature plummeted. The African wilderness took on a different rhythm at dusk. Crickets began their chorus, distant predators stalked silently through the brush, and the once distant laughter of hyenas grew closer. My limbs, bound in mud, trembled from exhaustion, and my mind teetered on the edge between clarity and delirium. Yet the lion remained. He shifted occasionally, rising to survey the terrain, ears swiveling with the sound of each distant movement, always returning to paw at the mud encasing me. He seemed aware of the dangers around us, the presence of scavengers, the harsh elements, and I, helpless and immobilized, became acutely aware that my survival depended entirely on this extraordinary creature. By midnight, my mind began to play tricks. Images of past expeditions, near misses, and even trivial memories of home flickered through my consciousness. I wondered if this intervention was a hallucination, a fevered creation of my dehydrated mind. But when I felt the subtle loosening of the mud around my shoulder, when the weight shifted imperceptibly beneath my arm, I had to accept reality. He was working to free me. The thought was almost unbearable in its improbability. Lions were predators. They were apex hunters, not helpers. No evolutionary instinct dictated compassion for a human, yet here he was, laboring as if my life mattered. Dawn brought the first rays of light over the horizon, pale and fragile. Birds began their morning songs, tentative and cautious, as if aware of the tension surrounding the watering hole. My body, already at the limits of endurance, shivered violently as the cold seeped through my clothes and the hardened mud. Despite my deteriorated state, I could feel a small but unmistakable shift. My right arm was now free to the elbow. For the first time in nearly 3 days, I could flex my fingers, a simple act that brought a surge of unexpected relief. The lion, still beside me, paused in his work to glance at me, nostrils twitching, as though gauging my response to this newfound mobility. The hyenas arrived at first light, moving stealthily through the grass, their opportunistic instincts guiding them toward the scent of weakness. My heart leapt, a simultaneous surge of fear and gratitude. The lion reacted immediately, tensing his massive frame and positioning himself between me and the approaching scavengers. A low, resonant growl rolled from his chest, reverberating across the open space, forcing the hyenas to pause. I had observed such displays countless times from a safe distance, but now, paralyzed and vulnerable, I felt the raw power of that defensive signal radiate through my very bones. The hyenas hesitated, circling warily at a distance, waiting for the predator to abandon his post or for me to perish. Hours passed in this tense standoff. The lion alternated between defending my fragile form and returning to the mud around my shoulders and torso. Every so often, he would sit back on his haunches, eyes scanning the surrounding plains, only to resume his meticulous digging. By midday, the progress was undeniable. Both arms, though battered and stiff, were now free to the shoulders, and I could move my hands enough to reach toward the distant edge of the watering hole. Pain lanced through my muscles as I struggled to reach the water, but primal need overcame everything else. My fingertips grazed the muddy surface, scooping up the liquid to my cracked lips. The taste, tinged with silt and debris, was beyond salvation. It was life itself. The lion watched my small act of recovery with the same unreadable expression I had come to recognize. It was not predation, not curiosity in the conventional sense. It was something else entirely, something I could only tentatively call attentiveness. I realized that in his own way, he was gauging my responses, adjusting his efforts, understanding instinctively that my survival might be intertwined with his vigilance. His gaze followed every movement, a silent calculation guiding each paw stroke in the mud, each shift in posture. Afternoon came with merciless heat. The sun pressed down with intensity, and my body ached from both dehydration and prolonged immobility. Yet the lion continued his strange, patient labor. It was as if he understood the rhythm of the day, the dangers that came with exposure, and the limits of my human endurance. He paused occasionally, resting for minutes at a time, before returning to the task with renewed energy. There was intelligence in his persistence, a deliberate choice that transcended instinct. Every observer I had studied, every behavioral principle I had memorized, could not explain what was happening. By late afternoon, distant sounds of engines began to reach my ears. Someone was approaching. Hope surged through my dehydrated consciousness, but I was too weak to call out effectively. The lion, however, reacted immediately, intensifying his efforts with a visible urgency, as if he recognized the potential aid that human presence could bring. Chunks of dried mud flew aside with each swipe of his claws, lines of weakness forming in the hardened surface, creating the first real path toward my release. His response was methodical, strategic, and inexplicably collaborative. Minutes stretched like hours as the sound of human voices grew louder. I tried to raise my arm to signal, the effort sending jolts of pain through atrophied muscles, but I managed a weak wave. Then, almost unbelievably, the lion added his voice, a deep, resonant roar that echoed across the landscape, simultaneously a call and a warning. It was a sound that commanded attention, a signal both primal and deliberate. Somewhere in the distance, human voices shifted in urgency. The rescue was finally within reach. The juxtaposition of fear, relief, and awe overwhelmed me. A predator, a creature that, by all logic, should have regarded me as prey, had not only refrained from attacking, but actively worked to preserve my life. Each moment of awareness deepened my understanding of the unpredictable complexity of wildlife, of the thin line between danger and salvation. I had entered the park seeking photographs of predators in action, yet here I lay, a human entirely powerless, observing a predator exhibit behavior that challenged the very foundations of my knowledge. The distant hum of the approaching vehicle was like a lifeline thrown across the vast expanse of Ruaha National Park. For 3 long days, I had been at the mercy of the mud, each moment a brutal reminder of human vulnerability in the wild. Now the sound, though faint, promised salvation. My body, worn and stiff, trembled as I tried to orient myself toward the source, but every movement brought sharp pain through muscles that had long lain immobilized. The lion, whose presence had been both terror and unexpected salvation, responded immediately. He shifted his massive frame with a precision that seemed almost intentional, positioning himself directly between me and the approaching danger. Or perhaps, in his mind, between me and the unknown aid. His amber eyes flicked toward the vehicle, nostrils flaring, and a deep rumble emanated from his chest. It was a signal both protective and deliberate, a sound I recognized from decades of observing lion behavior as a warning to intruders. Yet the timing, combined with his continued digging at the mud around me, suggested something more profound. The lion, my inexplicable ally, understood the arrival of humans and responded in a way that facilitated my rescue without compromising his protective stance. The vehicle drew nearer, engine growling and kicking up dust in its wake. Through my blurred vision, I could make out the shapes of park rangers and, of course, Jabari, whose concern had driven him to leave the usual search protocols behind and follow his instincts. My attempts to call out produced only a rasping whisper, hoarse and faint, but the lion's deep, resonant roar cut across the landscape. The sound carried with an authority that no human voice could match, drawing the attention of my rescuers and making them aware of our location. Within moments, the team arrived at the water's edge. Their eyes widened in shock, not only at the sight of a man trapped to the shoulders in hardened African mud, but also at the enormous lion standing mere feet away, amber eyes fixed intently on his charge. "Don't shoot," I croaked weakly, hoarse from dehydration. "He's helping." Jabari stepped forward first, hands raised in a gesture of caution, recognizing the extraordinary behavior unfolding before him. The other rangers hesitated, rifles raised instinctively, but Jabari's authoritative command convinced them to pause. He understood that the lion was not acting out of aggression, that something unprecedented was occurring. I had observed lions for years, documented their predation, and understood their social structures. But even my extensive experience had never prepared me for this. A predator actively aiding a human in distress. The rescue operation commenced cautiously. The lion, now observing from a short distance, did not retreat but maintained a watchful stance. His posture remained relaxed yet alert, a sentinel who understood both the necessity of human intervention and the importance of my safety. The team worked quickly, using tools to break apart the mud around my torso, while I relied on the limited mobility of my arms to assist where possible. Hours of persistent digging and careful maneuvering had made a path, but the mud's grip was relentless. Gradually, inch by excruciating inch, I began to emerge from my prison. Each pull, each movement, was accompanied by the lion's quiet presence, his eyes tracking every motion, ensuring the hyenas and other potential threats remained at bay. When my shoulders finally cleared the mud, the relief was overwhelming. My body ached with muscle damage, exposure, and the effects of severe dehydration. But consciousness and the awareness of survival brought an almost unbearable wave of gratitude. As I was lifted onto the stretcher, I turned my eyes toward him. The lion had retreated slightly, respecting the newfound human presence while maintaining vigilance. His gaze, however, remained fixed on me, and in that moment, I felt the weight of the connection we had forged over the past 3 days, a connection that defied all logical explanation. The park rangers had never witnessed such behavior. Their eyes held a mix of awe and disbelief. They had trained for dangerous encounters with wildlife, yet none had ever anticipated witnessing a predator actively participating in the rescue of a human. The helicopter ride to Dar es Salaam was a blur of motion, medical attention, and exhaustion. I was placed carefully inside, my body weak and battered, yet every moment brought flashes of the lion's actions back into my mind. The vivid memory of his paw against the hardened mud, the deliberate scraping of his claws, and the protective positioning against hyenas formed a tableau that challenged everything I thought I knew about wildlife. This was not instinctual predation. It was something entirely different. Recovery at the hospital was painstaking. The medical team worked tirelessly to reverse the effects of dehydration, muscle damage, and the early stages of kidney failure. Each day, as strength slowly returned, the mental and emotional impact of the experience weighed heavily. The trauma was not merely physical, it was a cognitive dissonance, a profound challenge to everything I had understood about predator behavior, human vulnerability, and the unpredictable nature of the wild. I had survived not through skill or preparation alone, but through the intervention of a creature whose actions defied conventional explanation. Word of the incident spread rapidly, first among park staff, then wildlife researchers, and eventually into the international media. Skepticism was the immediate response. After all, predators are not known to save humans. Scientific understanding dictated that such behavior was impossible, yet the eyewitness accounts of Jabari and the rangers provided corroboration that could not be dismissed. The lion, later identified as Jabali, had not only prevented other predators from approaching, but had methodically worked to loosen the mud that held me captive. The implications were extraordinary. 2 months after my rescue, my curiosity and perhaps compulsion drove me back to Ruaha National Park. Jabari accompanied me under strict conditions. We remained in the vehicle at all times, maintained satellite communication, and were supported by armed rangers. The landscape had shifted since my near-death experience. The watering hole smaller, yet the remnants of the mud in my entrapment were still visible. With powerful telephoto lenses, we scanned the horizon, hoping to document the lion's presence, to understand the extraordinary intelligence and motivation behind his actions. On the 3rd day he appeared. The same male lion, identifiable by the scar across his muzzle, emerged from the grass with the assured gait of an apex predator. He approached the water to drink, then paused, nostrils flaring as he assessed our vehicle. What followed was recorded on video, evidence that silenced many skeptics. The lion approached deliberately, not with caution typical of wild lions around humans, but with a familiarity that suggested recognition. He stopped approximately 20 yards from the vehicle, sitting on his haunches, mirroring the posture he had maintained beside me in the mud. For nearly an hour he remained, occasionally making soft chuffing sounds, the same vocalization he had used during my rescue. Then, with deliberate dignity, he rose and disappeared into the grasslands. The footage raised more questions than it answered. Why would a predator, evolutionarily conditioned to hunt, act in a way that protected and aided a human? What cognitive processes could explain such behavior? Scientists and researchers debated theories ranging from cross-species recognition to early life imprinting. My own experience had become the catalyst for a new understanding of wildlife intelligence, the first hint that empathy, memory, and recognition could exist in apex predators under rare circumstances. During my recovery and subsequent research involvement, I began to understand that this event was not merely a miraculous occurrence, but a gateway to a deeper comprehension of animal cognition. Jabali's behavior challenged centuries of established thought, illustrating that intelligence and social awareness could transcend species boundaries. The extraordinary act of survival that had kept me alive was now a profound case study, reshaping the way humans understood the wild. Even years later, the memory of that rescue remained vivid. Each detail, the sensation of the lion's paw, the precise digging, the watchful gaze was etched into my mind. I had entered the park seeking images of life and death in the wild, yet I had been witness to something far greater, an act of what could only be described as interspecies cooperation, a fleeting moment in which instinct yielded to an unknown form of understanding. The aftermath of my rescue left me physically frail, yet mentally restless. I could not ignore the questions that haunted me. Why had the lion helped? Was it instinct, a hallucination of dehydration, or evidence of something far more profound? Conventional wildlife biology offered no satisfactory answers. Apex predators are driven by survival, competition, and reproduction. Yet Jabali had acted outside every established norm. To uncover the truth, I turned to science, seeking insight from those equipped to probe the cognition of wild animals. Dr. Amara Enozi, an ethologist specializing in carnivore cognition at Oxford University, became my first point of contact. She approached the footage with a balance of skepticism and curiosity, her mind accustomed to scrutinizing anomalies within predator behavior. What you experience, she explained, eyes fixed on the monitor displaying Jabali's deliberate digging, may represent a previously undocumented form of interspecies recognition. It is rare, but not impossible. Predators can exhibit behavior influenced by early life experiences and social learning, and your account suggests something extraordinary. Historical investigations soon became the first step in understanding Jabali. Darianosi's team combed through Ruaha National Park records, uncovering an incident 3 years prior. A young lion cub, orphaned when poachers killed his mother, had been rescued by conservationists and rehabilitated in a nearby sanctuary. Photographs from that time revealed a distinctive scar across the cub's muzzle, the very same marking visible in the footage from my rescue. This was no ordinary wild lion. Jabali had known human kindness during a formative period in his life. The implications were staggering. Could a single positive interaction during youth create a cognitive framework that influenced an apex predator's behavior years later? Dr. Enosi suggested that recent studies on elephants and other intelligent mammals hinted at such possibilities. Memory, recognition, and even gratitude could extend far longer than previously believed. Field observations commenced under rigorous protocols. Blinds were erected near the watering hole, recording equipment installed, and a team of ethologists and wildlife biologists arrived to monitor the area continuously. Each day, we observed Jabali with a meticulous focus, cataloging every action. Unlike his peers, Jabali's responses to human presence were neutral, neither fleeing nor exhibiting aggression. He approached cautiously, occasionally vocalizing softly a chuff that appeared to communicate comfort or acknowledgement rather than threat. The behavioral contrast with nearby lions was stark. Most avoided humans entirely or exhibited overt caution. Several weeks into observation, we recorded an event that would solidify the theory of interspecies recognition. A wounded antelope limped near the watering hole, its leg mangled by a hidden snare. Jabali did not attack. Instead, he approached slowly, sniffing and circling, examining the injured animal without predation. After several minutes, he sat nearby, keeping watch before moving on. While some argued it was curiosity or opportunistic assessment, the consistency of these behaviors, coupled with his past experiences with humans, suggested something more complex, an awareness of vulnerability and a recognition of risk versus harm. Over the following months, our research expanded to include behavioral comparisons with other lions in the region. We noted that Jabali's territorial, hunting, and social behaviors with his pride remained typical. Dominance, hunting strategy, and cub rearing were unchanged, but his interactions with humans and vulnerable creatures demonstrated a subtle yet meaningful divergence. Whereas other lions exhibited instinctual wariness or aggression toward humans, Jabali's actions displayed a pattern of recognition. He remembered individual humans and responded in ways that prioritized observation and protection over instinctual hostility. The implications extended beyond the single case. 2 years after Jabali's rescue of me, a female researcher became stranded in the Serengeti, her vehicle immobilized in a remote area. For 2 days, she remained alone in a harsh environment, with the only apparent protection coming from a male lion who stayed nearby, keeping predators at bay. DNA analysis confirmed this lion as Jabali's biological brother. Like Jabali, he had been rehabilitated as a cub after being orphaned due to poaching. The behavior was strikingly similar: protection, vigilance, and a measured non-aggressive approach toward a human in peril. This suggested a potential pattern, a cognitive outcome influenced by early human intervention. As Dr. Inosi and her team published preliminary findings, debates erupted within the wildlife research community. Traditionalists argued that attributing complex cognition to lions risked anthropomorphizing their behavior, projecting human motivations onto instinct-driven creatures. Yet the documented evidence, the video, eyewitness accounts, and repeated observations, was difficult to dismiss. Each recording displayed intentionality, not randomness. Jabali's actions were not coincidental or conditioned by immediate reward. They were consistent with recognition, memory, and perhaps rudimentary empathy. I returned to Ruaha multiple times during the research period, not merely as an observer but as a participant in the ongoing study. My interactions were carefully regulated, distance was maintained, protocols followed, yet a pattern emerged. Jabali recognized me, approaching within a consistent 20 yards, lying down to watch my work for hours. In contrast, other humans in similar conditions elicited avoidance. Dr. Inosi's team termed this behavior affiliated recognition, a cognitive acknowledgement that I was not just any human, but a specific individual with whom he shared a unique history. The emotional weight of these observations was profound. I realized that my near-death experience had become the foundation for an entirely new understanding of predator cognition, challenging conventional assumptions and opening avenues for ethical wildlife interaction. Over time, our research documented social learning within Jabali's pride. On one occasion, he led 2 nearly mature male cubs toward my observation blind, teaching them that I posed no threat. For 10 minutes, the cubs remained in position, occasionally glancing between their father and me, absorbing the lesson in cautious recognition. The significance was staggering: an apex predator in the wild deliberately conveying knowledge about a human to his offspring. Such behavior suggested levels of cognitive complexity rarely acknowledged in large felines, and the ramifications for wildlife management and conservation strategies were immediate. The broader implications were explored extensively. If lions and other large predators possess such cognitive flexibility, it could reshape human-wildlife coexistence. Rehabilitation programs, historically focused solely on survival and territorial integration, now began to consider cognitive imprinting, memory, and the long-term effects of positive human interaction. Ethical discussions arose about the responsibilities of humans when intervening in predator lives, balancing the potential for future protective behavior and with the need to maintain wild instincts. My own approach to wildlife documentation transformed as well. No longer did I seek only predation or dramatic confrontations. Instead, I focused on subtle interactions, behaviors indicative of thought, emotion, and awareness. Each photograph captured now was a testament to cognitive complexity, a visual narrative of intelligence in the animal kingdom that defied simplistic categorization. Through Jabali, I learned to observe not only the visible act of survival, but the invisible currents of recognition, memory, and interspecies understanding that flow beneath the surface of every encounter. Years of observation, analysis, and documentation produced a remarkable body of evidence. From Jabali's early life imprinting to repeated displays of interspecies recognition and social teaching, a coherent narrative emerged. Lions, like other intelligent mammals, could retain memories of formative experiences with humans and act upon them in ways that transcended instinct. The research, initially met with skepticism, gradually gained acceptance as new methodologies validated the extraordinary observations. The story that began with my near-death experience in the Mo had evolved into a paradigm-shifting exploration of cognition, ethics, and conservation. Years passed since my harrowing entrapment in Ruaha National Park, yet the memory of that day remained as vivid as the rising sun over the African plains. Jabali, the lion who had defied all conventional behavior to save me, continued to be the central figure in my life and work. Time had changed him. His once dark mane was now streaked with silver, and his once powerful frame bore the faint scars of territorial conflicts and the marks of age. Yet, even in his advancing years, there was a dignity and intelligence in his posture that could not be denied, a presence that commanded respect not merely from humans, but from the other lions within his domain. During my 8th return to Ruaha, I was granted an unprecedented opportunity, permission to observe Jabali and his pride at close range, through the same observation blind that had served our previous studies. The pride had grown under his leadership, consisting of 5 females and numerous cubs spanning several generations. The continuity of his family provided a rare lens through which to study the social dynamics of an apex predator who exhibited cognitive behaviors beyond standard expectations. My focus had shifted entirely from capturing dramatic hunting scenes to documenting subtler, complex behaviors. Recognition, memory, and social learning within a species often defined solely by predation. On the 3rd morning of my observation, Jabali appeared with 2 nearly mature male cubs, identifiable by their emerging manes and the subtle facial features inherited from their father. The moment was extraordinary. Normally, wild lions exhibited cautious curiosity toward human structures, often avoiding them entirely. Yet Jabali led the cubs toward my blind with deliberate purpose, pausing at his customary distance of 20 yards. The cubs followed, their movements tentative, glancing between me and their father. For nearly 10 minutes, they remained in this formation, observing, learning, processing. Through years of field research, Dukanossi and her team had documented instances of social learning in lions. But this was different. Jabali was not merely demonstrating dominance or establishing boundaries. He was transmitting knowledge about a human who posed no threat. The behavior suggested intentional instruction, a deliberate act of teaching. As I documented the scene, the emotional impact was profound. Here was an apex predator, a wild creature defined by instincts of survival, reproducing, and territoriality, performing an act that reflected not only memory and recognition, but perhaps even rudimentary forms of empathy and social responsibility. Jabali's behavior forced me to reconsider the boundaries of animal cognition, the subtle interplay of instinct and learned experience, and the capacity for cross-species understanding. Every frame captured in my camera was more than a photograph. It was evidence that life in the wild was more nuanced than we had ever allowed ourselves to believe. The months that followed were filled with careful observation and documentation. Jabali's interactions with the cubs continued to reveal patterns of teaching and recognition. He would allow them to approach within close proximity of human observation points, then retreat, signaling boundaries and demonstrating caution. In one notable instance, he led a single cub toward a small watering hole where a distressed antelope had become entangled in reeds. The cub observed its father's methodical assessment of the situation, learning to approach without causing harm, a lesson in both observation and cautious intervention. Such events suggested that his influence extended beyond his pride, imparting cognitive strategies shaped by unique experiences and memory. The scientific implications were enormous. Jabali's behaviors challenged long-standing assumptions about predator cognition, demonstrating that early life experiences with humans could produce lasting behavioral adaptations. Dr. Inosi proposed that the imprint of positive human interaction could foster recognition, trust, and protective behavior that persisted into adulthood. These findings demanded a reevaluation of conservation strategies, particularly for apex predators. Rehabilitation programs now began incorporating protocols to maintain both natural instincts and positive human imprints, balancing survival skills with potential interspecies. Recognition. My own work evolved in parallel. Photography, once a pursuit of dramatic, high-stakes predation, now focused on documenting cognition, emotion, and subtle interactions within the animal kingdom. Each session with Jabali was an exercise in patience, observation, and ethical engagement. I photographed the flicker of recognition in his eyes when I approached, the deliberate pacing of his movements, and the interactions with his cubs that suggested complex social awareness. These images became central to lectures, publications, and documentary projects, challenging both professional and public perceptions of wild predators. Over time, Jabali's health declined, as is inevitable in all life. Age, territorial disputes, and the rigors of the African savanna left their mark. Yet even in his final years, he maintained the behavioral patterns that had made him extraordinary. During my last documented observation period, he appeared only once, moving slowly but deliberately to the customary distance from my blind. Amber eyes met mine across the space between us in a silent acknowledgement of the years we had shared, a mutual recognition of the bond formed in circumstances that transcended instinct and species. For nearly an hour, we regarded one another, a quiet testament to survival, trust, and the profound intelligence present in the wild. 3 months later, park rangers found Jabali resting peacefully beneath an acacia tree. His life, remarkable in its deviation from expectations, ended as it had been lived, with dignity, independence, and an undeniable intelligence that had transformed both the lives he touched and our understanding of predator cognition. Unlike typical protocol, he was buried rather than left for scavengers, a testament to the extraordinary role he had played in both scientific discovery and personal salvation. A small stone marker now commemorates not only his contributions to research, but also the life he had saved through inexplicable, unprecedented action. The academic papers, field studies, and documentaries that emerged from Jabali's life continue to shape the field of wildlife research. The Jabali protocols now inform rehabilitation and conservation practices, emphasizing the recognition of cognitive capabilities previously unacknowledged in predator management. Researchers worldwide have begun exploring similar phenomena across species, documenting elephants who remember human interactions, orcas demonstrating selective recognition, and primates exhibiting long-term memory for individuals. The implications extend beyond biology into ethics, conservation, and the philosophical understanding of cognition across species. For me personally, the experience redefined the very nature of my work and my relationship with wildlife. The mud that had nearly claimed my life became the foundation for a career devoted to the documentation of intelligence, empathy, and social learning among apex predators. Photography became not merely a medium for aesthetic representation, but a tool for advocacy, education, and bridging the gap between human understanding and animal cognition. The connection forged with Jabali continues to inform my approach to every expedition, every frame, and every encounter with creatures whose complexity often defies conventional understanding. In reflecting on these years, I recognize that Jabali's legacy is twofold, scientific and profoundly personal. Through him, I have witnessed a bridge between species, an example of cognitive recognition, and perhaps even a form of compassion that transcends instinct. He demonstrated that the boundaries we assign between human and wild are far more permeable than previously believed. More than survival, more than instinct, he imparted a message. Life in the wild is not solely defined by predation, but by intelligence, memory, and the extraordinary capacity for understanding that exists in forms we have only begun to comprehend. Jabali's story stands as a testament not only to his life, but to the transformative power of connection and observation. For the conservation community, the lessons are clear. Early interventions, careful rehabilitation, and respect for cognitive potential can produce outcomes that benefit both humans and wildlife. For those who witness and document the natural world, his life provides a blueprint for observing without interference, appreciating without exploitation, and recognizing that intelligence, awareness, and even empathy are not uniquely human. As the sun sets over Ruaha, casting long shadows over the vast plains, I think of Jabali and the legacy he leaves behind. His life was extraordinary, not simply because he saved me, but because he challenged assumptions, expanded understanding, and reminded us of the richness inherent in the natural world. The mud that nearly became my grave instead became the foundation for a deeper, more meaningful life, a life shaped by the recognition of the profound intelligence and emotional capacity present in the creatures we share this planet with. In the end, the story of Jabali is more than a story of survival. It is a story of connection, recognition, and the enduring potential for understanding between species. It invites us to reconsider the definitions of wildness, empathy, and intelligence. And in the quiet moments when the savanna stretches endless and golden, I am reminded that true wildness is not merely instinct. It is the freedom to act beyond expectation. And in that freedom, Jabali showed us what lions, and perhaps all animals, can truly be.